many of you have ever been to Glacier National Park? This is Mount Cannon. It's overlooking the lodge at Glacier National Park, and it's named Mount Cannon after a physician and his wife who summited it for the first time in recorded history, right, during their honeymoon. I want to introduce you to Dr. Cannon. His name's Walter Cannon. He was known throughout his life as a mountaineer who was the first on a lot of mountains in North America. He's also known as the guy who introduced the case study method to medical schools. He was the head of the Department of Internal Medicine at Harvard Medical School back in the late 1800s and early 1900s. He found that the textbooks were incredibly boring. His students were drifting off. He didn't think that was a good idea. So he brought in his colleagues and even some of his patients to talk about the work they'd done that morning or the day before. And students stayed awake. Other faculty noticed that. And pretty soon Harvard formally adopted the case study method of teaching medicine. And they attributed it to this guy. Right? There's another thing he's known for. He's one of the very first physicians ever to bring this newfangled thing called X-rays into medical research. Prior to that, they didn't really particularly have a use for X-rays. Right? Now, he would come in and he'd try to study the digestion system with X-rays. Does that strike anybody as strange? Any physicians in the group, you'd say, you know what? X-rays go right through your stomach. They don't see it. They go right through, like it's transparent. Right? So he invented what now we call the barium meal, so that it would make it all opaque so you could see it. Okay, so he's known for that. But what he's known for the most was what he did when World War I broke out. When World War I broke out, he decided he could serve the United States better by quitting his job at Harvard and going to Europe. He went to France, and he worked on the battlefield as a physician. And one of the first things he discovered is that more people die in battle due to shock than due to their wounds alone. That's still the case. Right? And at the time, there was no model to understand what shock really was. And he developed that model. When it comes to shock, here's what he said is going on. He said, your body's flooded with adrenaline, and blood rushes to your major muscle groups. That's a great thing if you're facing a saber-toothed cat. It's a horrible thing if you're gravely wounded, because you bleed out, and you have a catastrophic loss of blood pressure, and you die. And he coined a term for it. He called it the fight or flight syndrome. So we're building off his research. Now I want to update his research to today by introducing Amy Arnsten, the director of the Arnsten Lab at Yale Medical School. Now anytime you have a lab at Yale Medical School named after you, you know you're doing something right? She's on everybody's short list for a Nobel Prize in medicine. Here's what she studies. She studies what adrenaline does to the brain. And here's what happens. You're in a stressful situation, and she describes stressful as no more stressful than being cut off on the freeway. Okay, one of her books is called, or one of her articles is called The Biology of Feeling Frazzled. Right? So it's this frazzled notion. Right? Adrenaline, actually she'll call it epinephrine and norepinephrine, flood your brain, and it acts like a switch. It turns off your prefrontal cortex, that logical reasoning part, and it turns on the amygdala, which is the gateway to your lower brain, the part we share with reptiles. Right? And when that happens, it's one of these good news, bad news kinds of things. The good news is when you're operating out of your lower brain, your reaction times are much quicker. Right? And your hearing is enhanced. And your vision is actually more acute. This is all good stuff. The only downside is that your verbal skills drop to almost nothing, which is okay if you're facing a saber-toothed cat, right? But if you're facing like your boss, your spouse, we've all been there, right? This isn't a good thing, right? So the skills we're going to build today are how do we leverage out? How do we turn that switch the opposite way? So what we're going to do today is look at some skills and strategies for leveraging out of our more primitive reptilian brain back into our prefrontal cortex, where we can come up with logical, rational, and understanding-based solutions. And that's where we're headed next.